Hey, what's up, and welcome back to the Pointman podcast. My name is Zach. I am the Pointman pastor here at that church, and man, I'm excited to be back doing a live episode of the podcast. We've been doing some of our Bible study that's recorded online, which is fun, and it's important, but it's not as much fun as just hanging out and talking on the podcast here with you guys, and so I'm glad we're back. The whole reason that we have the Pointman podcast in the first place is to help connect men to the Bible and make Jesus known to men everywhere. And so that's why we're here. That's what we're doing today. But today is a special episode, if you will, because it is Father's Day.
Father's Day.
And so what better thing to talk about than dads on Father's Day?
Yeah. The example that they are for us or the example that we are for our kids. So it's a good point man message to have today, for sure.
Yeah. And the Bible is very strong on what it says about men and their role as a father and his role as a dad and what that looks like. And so I think it's definitely important for us to talk about, but I wanted to start this off. So this morning I was sitting around and I was thinking about like TV dads, and I was trying to come up with a top 10 list of TV dads. So I Google it, and I'm looking around, and like depending on the website, the culture, whatever it comes from, the top 10 list differs on who should be in it. So I kind of composited all of them together, and then I took all of I've seen all these TV shows. I'm a TV, like I love watching different TV series, and so I don't really do movies, but I love TV.
That's what I was going to ask. Like, you don't watch movies, but
I don't watch movies, but I like TV. And I think it's because it's shorter spans, so like I can just turn off after an episode and then come back later.
I'm the same about you, Aaron.
Yeah. The movies just are like the character development. I don't know. I just like TV better. But anyway, so I came up with my top 10 TV dads, and these are in from worst to best.
10 to 1.
10 to 1. One being my favorite TV dad of all time. Okay. So first and foremost, number 10, I have Tony Soprano.
Okay.
I'm all over the place with this list.
Okay, all right.
I have Tony Soprano.
I was not expecting.
Here's why he makes the list. It's a very interesting character, and if you've ever seen the show, you feel very much bad for him. You feel good for him. You're sad for him, and you're mad at him like every single episode. If you've ever seen the show,
what show?
It's The Sopranos.
No, Sopranos.
I've watched very few episodes of that.
I've been watching it actually lately because I missed it when I was too young when it came out, but I heard some people talking about it, and I just kind of wanted to see what all the hoopla is about. But it's a very interesting character. Anyway, Tony Soprano, number 10. Okay. Number 9, I have Mike Brady of the Brady Bunch.
Okay. I've never seen it either, though. So
I have.
I have him at number 9 more because he's a famous TV dad than maybe a good example of a TV dad, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure.
But popular, so we know who he is.
He has a lot of kids.
Mike Brady.
Yeah, he did know how to manage the blended family.
That's an interesting point. That is an interesting take on Mike. That's a very well developed and thought out take on Mike Brady.
So the only thing I know is he had a lot of kids. That's about all I know about the Brady Bunch.
Here's a story.
Yeah, it's like that's about all I know of the Brady Bunch. I've never seen a single episode of the Brady Bunch.
My wife really likes the Brady Bunch, so I've seen it a few times. Gotcha. Number 8, I have Carl Winslow. Family Matters, Urkel.
Okay.
Yes.
Carl Winslow. Yeah. He's the dad. It's not Urkel's dad. It's the dad of the family that the show's kind of big.
Laura.
Yeah.
Man, we have a lot to go because there's a lot I still have in my head that we have not mentioned yet. Like
we've got some good ones coming up.
Okay, gotcha. I'm ready for them now.
All right, so number 7 is one of my favorite TV dads of all time, but I don't know if he's the greatest example of a TV dad, so that's why he landed at number 7 on my list. George Lopez from the George Lopez Show.
I didn't watch much of that
Loved
series
it.
either.
He's just always talking mad trash to his kids.
All the time, 100%.
Which I feel like you can relate.
Yes, 100%. But always one of my favorite TV dads of all time. And then number 6, I have Tim the Toolman Taylor from Home Improvement.
So I was waiting for this one to come up. I feel like Tim, to me, it reminds me a lot of my own dad.
Okay.
Coming from a family of all boys, and him being like a construction worker, working on cars, mechanic guy.
I think that Tim Allen is the quintessential TV dad, and in fact, he's going to be on the list again in a minute. Okay. But at number 6, I have Tim the Toolman Taylor.
He's my number 1. Got to be on my list, on my tier list. But
we'll get to number 1 in a minute.
I got you.
Number 5, I have Dre Johnson from Blackish.
I've never seen it either.
I think he's a really good TV dad. He does a great job of navigating like issues with his kids and the way that he discusses them. Gotcha. He could make some people mad if you're like ultra conservative, but I really like the show. I like him. I think he's a great character. So I have Dre Johnson, number 5. Number 4, I have Phil Dunphy from Modern Family.
Phil Dunphy, yeah.
I think Phil's a great dad. He doesn't necessarily show like the big masculine, manly, like.
Yeah, but not all dads are like that.
Exactly. Yeah. But he's a great, I think, father figure for his kids.
Yeah, he's always trying to figure it out. He's like he's always like, he'll admit when he's wrong later on, but like he knows he messes up a lot, which I don't know, it's kind of a good thing for
the pilot episode of Modern Family is one of my favorite episodes of TV ever. Whenever the son shoots the daughter with the airsoft gun, and they're sitting around the calendar and they're scheduling on, it's like, shoot Luke later.
Put it on, yeah.
They put it on the calendar.
Yeah.
Shoot Luke.
I like that. I do like that show. It has a lot of funny, like him, like you're saying, him as a dad, not always like the go out there getter, but he's try hard.
Yeah,
to be a good dad, which I feel like that's what makes a good dad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Number 3, I'm back with Mike Baxter, who is Tim Allen from Last Man Standing.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Yeah.
I think that he has to navigate. I think it's more layered than he was whenever he was in Home Improvement. There's more like layers to the storylines that he's having to deal with because it's a more, I think, modern developed show.
Gotcha.
And so he's a great example, I think, of he's kind of the conservative version of Dre Johnson. Like if there was 2 sides to that coin, they would kind of be the 2 sides.
The other side, yeah.
But I think he's a great example. Number 2, Danny Tanner from Full House.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
Again, maybe more famous TV dad than anything, but definitely top 5. And then number 1.
Okay, this is what I'm ready for. This is what I'm waiting for.
Philip Banks, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
Okay, I was going to say, if he's not the number 1 TV dad,
look,
then
there's no other
wrong.
TV dad who has a rap song that points to it.
True.
Yeah, he's awesome.
Philip Banks, number 1.
Yes.
He supported his family.
Yep.
He provided for his family. He brought in his nephew. Like all of these things, check. And then like there's episodes of TV that like make you emotional a little bit.
Yeah.
And there's a few episodes where he's dealing with Will or things that are going on, and I'm like, that like is a deep, heavy moment for anyone, and he plays it, and it's a great example, I think, on TV.
Yeah. So you looking back, like, man, Dr. Phil. I'm just calling him Dr. Phil.
Yeah.
Uncle Phil, he was the man. Like he was always taking care of him, like you said, and he was just always there to give you little quips of insight or some wisdom. He was always there to give you a little piece.
And like, unlike some of the other dads on this list, Tony Soprano's a joke, by the way. Like it's not really a dad you idolize. It's just a famous TV character.
You could have put Al Bundy in that spot.
Yeah, I mean, I just thought it was funny that he was made anybody's list. I was like, I'm including him. But like Philip Banks kind of he's the masculine. He's also the leader of the household. He's also the disciplinarian at times. He commands the respect of his family. He leads his family. Like all of the aspects and things that you check off of like example of dad, you find in Philip Banks in the show, to the point where Will, who's like this wild person, and that's the whole point, respects him in the show and respects the way that he kind of his authority in a way. So I don't know. He's my number 1 for sure.
And the spot on discipline is where every time his buddy messes up, I forget what his buddy's name is.
Jazz.
Yeah, every time he messes up, he's like, "That's it," and he just throws him out of the house every single time, which I think was hilarious.
DJ Jazzy Jeff, his actual DJ in real life.
Yeah, chucks him out of the house, but that was hilarious. But yeah, Dr. Phil, Mr. Phil is Uncle Phil was a good, very good role model. I feel like for his kids, and I feel like that's what we should be going to our kids as well.
Rest in peace, Phil.
R.I.P.
For real, you're the only father that I ever knew.
Yeah, it's good. I like your list. A couple of tweaks I'd make, but.
Who would you add anybody? Any TV dads you would add?
I see. I didn't get the list pulled up. I was just gonna kind of go off yours, but I really think that Tim should be number 1, but because I feel like he actually, I guess it would be the neighbor. Would be the neighbor on because he always went to him for advice, which I mean you can kind of coordinate.
Wilson,
with that. You can always kind of correlate with us with God as well. As like, yes, we are the father to our family, but you always got to call on somebody else for advice if you need it. Yeah, which is kind of a good analogy for us as well.
Yeah, I never connected with Tim Allen when he was in Home Improvement. Like it was never. I connected to him more in Last Man Standing, and I probably just like Last Man Standing the show better. I think the character's fairly similar. In fact, a lot of the characters from Home Improvement end up making appearances on Last Man Standing later. I think for me, like growing up, I watched Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
Okay.
I watched George Lopez. I watched
Yeah,
those shows way more than I ever watched like the traditional like white sitcoms.
Yeah,
So
sure, like Frasier, Friends.
Funny
Seinfeld.
thing, we got UPN 38 would come in clear
Yeah.
on my TV, but like normal TV wouldn't.
Yeah, like
And
Channel
so-
42, stuff like
yeah,
that.
so like I watched all of those shows, but I didn't watch like Last Man Standing
Sure.
and stuff until later. So I think I just grew up watching like Philip Banks as
Yeah,
the dad
I'll
and stuff
say
like that.
for me, it was like I was probably throwing in Bill Cosby from the Cosby Show.
He was not on any list, and I understand why probably,
Yeah.
but
The downfall there.
yeah, interesting that he was not. I mean, separate the character from the
actual
actor.
person, yeah. Yeah. You were going
Because
for
I
characters.
agree. I thought about him too, as someone who might should have made the list. Another character I thought was interesting is Eddard Stark from Game of Thrones made the list.
Never seen it.
I was like, that's like, I don't really think of fatherhood when I think of anybody in that show. It's just like a character in this mythical realm, not really like a dad necessarily. And it may be too, we're looking at like connection to these people
Yeah.
in the time periods that these shows are popular.
I'll say or
Like
that or-
none of us said anything about the Brady Bunch. Like we don't connect necessarily. He's just a famous TV
Right.
dad. Yeah.
Like King of the Hill or
So
Hank Hill.
Bob's Burgers, Homer Simpson,
Yeah, it's
Hank
like
Hill,
Homer's-
they all made lists.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
Homer's not he's a horrible example.
Peter
of what a
Griffin?
father should be.
Yeah. But all those characters all made lists too.
Yeah.
But
I'll
no.
say I'll reach back even like Andy Griffith.
He was on all the lists. I just don't know. I didn't watch it. I've never really gotten into it, so I never could.
See, like when I was a kid, I grew up watching like that, then like Family Ties,
Married with Children.
Married
I liked-
Children.
I thought about Married with
he's goofy.
Children. Yeah.
Growing Pains, That Dad.
So what do you think about this? So there's always been like this thought process that dads in TV are portrayed as these like weak kind of tread on men.
Sure. Yep.
What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that that's true? Do you think that you see it a lot? Is it something that is a part of TV? I was trying to thinking through the list. The only one on my list that I'm like, he kind of is the joke, but butt of every joke is Phil.
Yeah.
He's kind of the weak guy, the trampoline tumbling. Like they kind of make him to be this.
Yep.
But there's also moments where he like connects with his kids in a way that nobody else can, and he does all these things. So what do you think about that? Do you think there's like a standard we should uphold in the way that we look at men on TV?
Well, I think there is. What I think the main reason they have those stereotypism where like the dads don't know what they're doing. They're goofy. They're out mowing the lawn, doing whatever. You know, they're not really. They're just trying to pander. They're trying to send it out to a large audience, and that's what people are trying to. There's as many people who will watch it as possible, and a lot of the times you want to give your family to watch shows with you, so you're sending out for something that your kids will also watch, and the kids are like, oh yeah, dad's stupid, kind of like my dad,
Yeah.
you know. And so that's
a
kind
good
of
point.
the way I feel about it, is like that's not always the portrayal, but like you said, people watched Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and he was not the type of that anyone ever made fun of or anything like that. I'm sure there was episodes where they made fun of him, but most of the time he was the dude. He's the man.
I don't remember an episode, and like you say, there probably
Yeah.
is one, but I don't ever remember one where he is like the butt of the joke. Like there are probably times where they pick on him because
Yeah,
they're his
for sure.
dad,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
yeah, he's a very like he is the man
Yeah.
in the family. Like there is no doubt about it, no question about it. He makes the money, he supports the family, does all the things. I think if you had like something to say negative about him is the way that he kind of lets his daughter run all over him a little bit.
Yeah.
Because she's kind of just does whatever she wants all the time on the show.
She's daddy's girl. Or
Yeah.
yeah, for sure.
So there is that, I guess. But yeah, I don't know. I was trying to think about that because I hear people talk about it all the time. And there are shows, really, it's Modern Family is the one that I can think of where people are like, yeah, that dad's not. But I think there's also the flip side. There's episodes of other shows that I watch where the dads will like not be a part of the show, but they'll come in and they'll just be these gruff, like they're essentially worthless. They're just masculinely worthless.
Yeah.
But they're still not being a father. They're still not helping their kids or raising up a family or, providing for the generation. They're just like, beer, fishing, hunting.
right.
Like that doesn't help either.
No, either way. And that you don't want your dad to be either too strict one way or too loose one way. You kind of want to be that middle dad where there's rules, guidelines, but you also don't want to be the flimsy, I'm just going to go mow the yard, do whatever you want
Yeah.
type of dad. So, but yeah, it's good.
Cool. So wrap up. top 10. Any final guys you think should make it?
I think Hank should be on there
Concrete?
somewhere.
Hank Hill?
Yeah, I think he should be on there. He was awesome, Dad. Even though he was always yelling at Bobby, but Bobby was always jacking it up. So
Dang it, Bobby. Yeah.
yeah, I like Hank Hill.
I got into that one later.
Yeah, it's good. Yep. Mm-hmm.
All right, cool. So, dads. Bible talks a lot about dads. Talks about raising up generations. We talk about manliness in different aspects all the time, but being a dad is a very specific aspect of it. And it is being a father. It is having children. It is raising up a new generation. It's not enough to be masculine. There's additional like standard of development for the next generation that you have are expected to adhere to.
Yeah.
And I think it's important that we look at some of that. I actually, when we were first starting this conversation, a verse that always stands out to me is Ephesians 6:4. But you actually sent 6:1 through 4, so I'm going to read the whole thing. It says, children, obey your parents because you belong to the Lord, for this is the right thing to do. Yep. Honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise. If you honor your father and mother, things will go well for you, and you will have long life on earth. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger by the way you treat them. Rather, bring them up with discipline and instruction that comes from the Lord. And so I think that for me, Ephesians 6:4 is an important verse because I'm generally an excitable person. So like I can get loud and aggressive quickly at times, and so it's a verse that I have to try to remember. And in the last couple of years, it's been something I've really tried hard to be better with when I'm dealing with my kids, especially my older kid, to not just be like yelling and screaming at the drop of a hat, which previously I would have just started yelling and screaming.
Right.
But as I read this verse and as these verses and as I just read them again, I start to think about it in the fact that this is a dual layered expectation. It's not enough to say children obey your parents, but it's parents do the right thing by your children as well. Right. And so I think as fathers, we culturally get into a mindset of like, do what I say because I said it. Yeah. But why did you say it? And it's not for the kid to question necessarily, but it's for us to question. Right. It's for us to look internally and to look at our motivation for certain things and why we've instructed our kids to do that. Is it selfish? Is it because we think it's right in the eyes of God? Like, what is the reason that we do that? Yeah. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Well, I was just that verse kind of stands out to me is like you were saying is obey your parents, and then what if you have crappy parents?
Exactly.
And
which is something that people say a lot.
Yeah, sure. And Bible says like don't be a crappy parent. Don't anger your kids. Don't do things to them just to make them angry. Or it says be respectful for your kids and love them like the way you should, like the way I have loved you. And if you're loving your kids the way that God loved you, you're going to be a good parent, and it just comes with that. But yes, obey your parents, your earthly parents, because that's who God's given you to raise you. But you also don't be a little turd of a kid either. That's what it says. So
no, I think that's good.
Obey your parents. That's kind of what I get from it. But it's the same thing with like husbands submit to your wives, but also just the exact same way wives submit to your husbands says it right after that in the Bible. So yeah, be a good husband, but you also need to be a good wife. Like it goes hand in hand. They go tandem.
Yeah, I think as dads, and this is a great example. Both of those verses. Sections of scripture that you just mentioned are a good example of like you can't just pull a verse out and be like, this is it. Right. This is the one. Like what is going on around it and what is the conversation going on? It's really important to read the full block. Now you could take Ephesians 6:4 out and say, don't provoke your children to anger. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That makes sense. Like you don't need the corresponding scriptures necessarily to understand that that's a valuable piece. But if you go back to 1 and it says honor your father and mother. Well, what if my dad is a crappy dad? Right. What if he is just like, beats my mom, is horrible to us as kids? Like, what do we do then?
Well, I think there's also the expectation of their example. Yes, they are a bad example, but that's something that you can take from it when you have kids or you have your own family. I'm not going to be like that. I'm going to be different than how my dad treated us in our family. It's an example, yes, crappy that they were the way that they were, but you can take that as like, I'm going to be different. I'm going to be something different than how my dad raised us. So that's just the way I look at it.
Yeah. So,
but I also wanted to talk about the point of where it says, here's a promise I give you. God says, I'll give you a promise. If you obey the parents that I gave you, that you were raised in, you're going to have a long life here on earth. And that's something that I think about a lot too, is God doesn't make a lot of promises about like living a long life, because that is not the whole point of us being here, but that's one example of where God's like, hey, you obey your parents, you listen to the wisdom they give you, I'm going to give them wisdom they give to you. You're actually going to live life and prosper on earth. So I think it's a really cool promise that God gives us.
It is really funny. Like as a kid, I remember my dad saying things, and I think that we grew up in a really interesting time because we saw the tech boom,
Right.
and so like we were learning things that like our parents should be teaching us. We were learning that with them,
Right.
For the first time, like in history, this is happening, and they're
Mm-hmm.
not passing information down. We're kind of sharing the development of that information. But I remember thinking to my dad was like, and I'm sure every teenage boy thinks this. It's like, I'm smarter than him. Like, I can figure that out. But then looking back, like if I had just listened to some of the things that he had said and like
100%.
some of the example that he presented,
Yep.
I would have made so many fewer like screw ups in my lifetime. And then now that I have a teenager who's leaving and going to college, it's like, dude, like if you would just shut up and listen to me sometimes, you would like learn so freaking much because like I've already made the mistakes that you don't need to make.
100%.
And that makes it. That gives practicality to this verse when it says you will thrive and you will have a long life. Of course you will.
Yep.
If you don't make the same mistakes as the people who came before you and you listen to them and their correction,
Yep.
then life's going to be a little bit better and it's going to go a little bit longer
Yep.
than if you continue to make the dumb mistakes, continue to do things that are going to harm you in some way.
Yep.
And so, yeah, I think that's an interesting thing to look at.
Yeah, I agree 100% with that. Wisdom that comes from your parents, because they're like, dude, I just did what you did, what you're doing. Don't do it like that. Be better than me. And I don't know. It's just kind of I guess it's a philosophy type answers. Whereas like if you get better every generation, you should eventually be a really good human being. And if you learn from each generation, you pass it on to your kids. They pass that information on to their kids. But that's the same reason we have like history and everything, is like so we can learn from it and be better because of it. But I think it's really cool. Is like you can always gain a bunch of insight and knowledge from your dad. And you pass that on, not just your dad, but you could be your mom as well. But just information that you can succeed in your life if you just had listened and not just being like, oh, my dad's dumb, I'm going to listen to what he says. And you're like, crap, I should have listened to him. I just jacked that up. But yeah, it's good.
Yeah. It's and we see it in today. You just made an interesting point when you said that if we continue to improve each generation, the next generation gets better.
Sure.
But that's not what we're seeing happen.
No.
And so we're seeing that in a lot of aspects. I would say that the generation that's coming up now has more promise than the last few, ours included. But we didn't see an improvement year over year, generation over generation. In fact, we saw a degradation of society. We saw a lack of conviction for what's important and for what matters.
Yep.
I think if I could call on men to do anything as far as fathers go, is to prioritize the appropriate things in their life, in the appropriate places. And if you do that, then things like trickling down into raising your kids and raising that next generation and improving their life is going to happen because it's going to fall into the hierarchy as it's supposed to.
Yep.
But we see far too many, like we were talking about the other day, there's a ballpark in Cabot, Arkansas, who they used to play baseball games on Saturday, but they've moved them to Sunday because it's easier to get people to skip church than it is to skip the lake on Saturday to come play baseball. I say the lake, whatever they're doing on Saturday, their free day.
Yep.
That's so sad because that means that there's a group of parents who made that decision. Those kids are going to play baseball any day of the week. They just want to play ball.
Yep.
They don't really care what day it is. They just want to get out there and play. But there's a group of parents. There's a generation of people who have prioritized things out of order. And they've gotten into this mindset like, hey, my kid needs to be here versus at church. And I think baseball's great. I played all the freaking time. And so I'm not saying that you shouldn't do that.
Yep.
I'm not saying you should forsake it. But if we are willing to compromise in this one aspect of life and not put God first on one day. I mean, we're not even talking about in your whole life. I'm talking about the day that was set aside as his anyway. Then where are you compromising elsewhere in your life? Like where's the hierarchy breaking down? And what are your kids learning from that? Well, they're learning that Sunday morning's for baseball. They're learning that this thing is important. It's more important than anything else we could be doing at this 9 a.m. on a Sunday is we're supposed to be playing baseball. And that's going to trickle down into the other aspects of life.
Yeah, kind of teaching your kids the way they should live, and I think it kind of leads right into the verse I was going to talk about next. Deuteronomy 6:4-9 says, so this is right after the people got out of the Egyptian as they were living in Egypt and they got out, and then God's talking to them like, hey, I have these commandments. You need to follow it. This is what you need to do. Decide right now. And so this is where it kind of leads up to. And it says, listen, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord alone. You must love the Lord your God with all of your heart, all of your soul, and all your strength. And you must commit yourselves wholeheartedly to these commands that I am giving you today. Repeat them again and again to your children. Talk about them when you are at home and when you are on the road, when you are going to bed and when you are getting up. Tie them on your hands and wear them on your foreheads as reminders. Write them on your doorpost of your house and on your gates. And kind of go back to that verse where it says, repeat them again and again to your children. Like you're saying, be that example, but also you need to teach them, yes, these are the Lord's. We need to love the Lord with all our heart, all our mind, all our strength. That's the most important thing. And if you pass that on to the next generation, I think you're winning as a dad and as a father.
Yeah, we were talking. I was actually talking today, and I was actually talking to somebody yesterday about it as well. We can get the cart before the horse sometimes with faith. There are people who believe in like the standard of God is the most important thing. I think the standard of God is incredibly important, and not to forsake that standard. But if you worship God fully and you pursue God fully, the standard becomes the consequence of the worship. But whenever you worship the standard, you forsake the worship of God in the first place. And so, like in our lives, if we were raising up our kids and we're like, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do this, you must do this. But you're not explaining to them why those things are important, which is the worship of God in the first place, then they're never going to fully understand. Like I grew up at a Methodist church, and so it's very tradition focused more than it is relationship focused. In fact, it wasn't until that I went to a different type of church that I understood relationship with Jesus was an important part. I just thought we did this thing. We are Christians. Like it's just we're going to heaven. Like we come to church, we do this thing. And I think that we, even well-intentioned people are like, this is what the Bible says is right and wrong. I'm going to beat you over the head with the right and wrong. If we, as fathers, are focused on teaching our kids how to worship God and why it's important to pursue God, these other things become a consequence of that worship. And so you don't have to you still have to teach your kids right from wrong, but you don't have to beat them over the head with the X's and O's any longer of faith, because they're a consequence of wanting to be in pursuit of God. And so when I say what I said, I mean that we need to prioritize that pursuit. We need to focus on Him, and part of that is going to church, because you need to be around other believers. You need to be around people who are learning and growing and establishing faith together, because it's just an important aspect of our faith. But as far as raising up a generation of people, I hope for my kids that I raise them up to know who God is and to want to know Him more than if I care about the X's and O's of and rights and wrongs. I think that it will take care of itself in a way.
No, I agree 100%. And then think about like the prodigal son, where he was raised the right way. Yes, they might stray. I strayed. I think you've said you've strayed as well.
Luke's like, can I just throw you under the bus right quick, very nicely?
There was about 4 years or 5 years of my life where I was just like, yeah, I'm going to be off. But I was taught that young, and I think that's what it's kind of like what Pastor Scott was saying today is like your kids are arrows. You put them in your bow and you shoot them. You've done everything you can do. Life's going to take them where it goes, but as long as you point them in the right direction, done everything you possibly can do, eventually they're going to keep following the Lord and they're going to come back to it. But it might take time. So just keep that in mind, because you never know where they're going to end up. But if you've taught them correctly, showed them the Word, and that Jesus loves them, and that He wants to be their Heavenly Father as well, then eventually they'll be all right.
Let's take the bow example.
Sure, I like it.
So the verse is incredible. It makes a ton of sense on the outset. But think about this. So we shoot bows to make a video for Pointman, for our intro video for the semester. Shane goes. Shane is like an over-the-top archer. He's extremely good. He doesn't miss. But he does all the things to make sure he doesn't miss. He reads the wind. He weights his bow. He counterweights the bow. He focuses. He's got the grips. He's got the goggles or the arrows. He's got these specialty tips. Like, he's done all of the work possible to make sure that whenever he releases, it's going where he thinks it's going. And, I think for when we read that verse, it's like, oh, yep, here we go. Like, that's one way of shooting a bow. That's how I shoot it. And it goes 10 feet, and I'm out, or may not hit what I aimed at. But But then there's people like him who they're doing all of the things they could possibly do to make sure that the arrow hits the target in the right spot. I want to be the dad who does all the things that I can do to make sure the arrow hits the target in the right spot. He's still going to miss at some point.
Yep.
Right.
He's not going to make a perfect shot. He's still going to screw something up. There's going to be a calculation that's off. He's going to read the wind wrong. There's something that's going to happen.
A huge gust of wind will come up.
Yeah,
like you
that
never
he
know what's
can't
gonna
control.
happen. Yeah,
Or he'll blink while shooting.
But he's done everything else inside of the realm of possibility to control to make sure when he releases it that it's going in the where he intended it to go. I think for us as dads, like when we think about how we're aiming, the things we're doing, the work we're putting in to make the shot a success, like, are we doing everything? Have we done all the work? Have we taken the practice shots? Have we, accounted for all the variables?
Yeah.
And you're not going to account for them all. Like you say, a big gust of wind comes up, knocks the arrow off track. But up until that gust of wind, have you taken into account everything that you can possibly take into account? Have you done all the things you can do?
I've been thinking about this a lot lately, and the barbaric semester that we had, really, the book actually spoke to me about trying to train your kid up as they should go. And I was always, I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, so I'm not that much into fatherhood. But what I've learned so far has been very eye-opening to how our Father looks at us. And I know God gives us children because He wants us to have that same, like, He looks at us as children, and He wants us to have that same point of view that we have toward our kids and try to raise them up the right way, because He's like, sometimes you're hard-headed, and you're like, well, I'm hard-headed, and you have your kid, and you're like, oh, they are. Sometimes they really are hard-headed. So I think God does that for us, for our own mindset. But for the book, it actually talked about, like, you can do everything you can do, keep them safe, protected, show them every day, like, keep them submitted and give them spankings when they get wrong. You're like, yeah, you should be doing that, sure. But he was talking about his kid was going to jump off the roof.
I was about to say that,
and dude, that story has, like, really changed the way I've been parenting lately. And after I've read that story where he said his kid was up on the roof of the second floor, and him and his wife were outside, and he was telling his kid, like, hey, or his son was telling him, like, hey, I'm going to jump off. And every other parent in the world would be like thinking,
including his wife in that moment.
Yeah, don't jump. You don't want to break your legs. But if you're having them trained to be an adult one day, you're not always going to be there, or you're not going to be there in every situation. Like, say you're out at work and the house catches fire and he has to go up on the roof to get out of the flames, and he has to jump off. If you've always told him, don't jump off the roof, he's going to be terrified. He's not going to do it. But it's like, I jumped off this earlier and I was fine. Yeah, I hurt my ankle or whatever, but at least he didn't die. So I've been thinking about that a lot lately. It's like, you need to train your kids the best they can, but life's going to happen to them. So just try to train them as best you can and let the Lord take care of it, because a lot of times you're not going to be in your hands, but you got to trust the Lord.
But that's not to say you don't punish your kid. That's not to say you don't set boundaries for your kid.
100%.
But yeah, there is I think a flip side to the boundary setting, rule setting for some people. And like, I think it's well-meaning and well-intentioned a lot of times, but like, how does that kid operate in society whenever they've only known the right thing?
Yeah, right.
Like, if you don't ever have an expectation of what the other side sounds, looks, feels like how do you interact with that whenever you run into it? Because you're going to eventually. Yeah. You can't hide inside of your bubble forever. No. Eventually, the bubble's going to collapse on you.
And if you give them that foundation of they should be following God and reading their Bible and praying, they will figure that out themselves, because there's something that you can't teach your kids that you're going to have to figure it out themselves.
But that's a consequence of the worship. That's a consequence of the pursuit.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Which is, not to dwell on Barbarian Way any longer, really, but that's kind of the whole idea behind the book. Yeah. I mean, it's about being a warrior. It's about it's not actually for men specifically, but it speaks to men and men's issues a lot.
Sure.
But there's a lot about that is like, let's tear down the walls of all these things that are getting in our way of a pursuit of God, and let's worship Him. Yeah. As parents, like, let's first and foremost raise our kids to know who He is and to worship Him and to pursue Him, and then let's teach them the right from wrong. Not that you don't need to be doing them at the same time. I'm just saying, like, let's make the most important thing the most important thing, and let these other things be the consequence of the important thing. I don't know. No, maybe I'm overthinking it.
No, I think that's good. And I think if you don't think about it, if you don't worry about it, then you're not doing what you're supposed to be. Not worrying. If you're not at least putting some effort into thinking, trying to be a good dad and a good father, then you're leading astray. But if you have that conscious thought of like, man, I want to be a good dad, then you're on the right path anyway.
Yeah, and I think the arrow example is great.
Yeah.
That's awesome. We need to. That's a whole semester or something in and of itself.
Yeah.
the notched arrow. All right, so dads. We're all dads.
Yeah.
We all have dads.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So, funny dad story.
Okay.
Either you being the dad or you looking to your dad.
Okay. Who goes first?
You can go first.
All right. So my dad, he is he's a construction man.
Yeah.
First and foremost.
Check episode dudes with no sleeves on shirts.
So yeah, he's a hard worker, always has been. What's the word for opposite? It's like not the epitome, but doesn't matter. The opposite of lazy. That's the way I would describe my dad. He's a hardworking dude. But so we were out putting tin on a roof or on the side of one of his rent houses, and he has you're screwing in the tin on the roof on the side of the house, and he had a couple of them in his mouth. Talking about like when you're screwing something, you keep a couple in your mouth so you don't have to.
Episode 12.
So you don't have to keep bending over in your pocket. So he had a couple in his mouth, and he was screwing them in, and then all of a sudden, like he was screwing one in as he had like two in his mouth. And it popped a certain way, and the screw kind of went to the left, it popped, it bounced off the side, and bounced right into his mouth as he was screwing. And then he looked at me, and he looked back, grabbed the same screw, put it back in the gun, and just kept screwing. And I feel like that's such a rarity, like something that would never happen. Like I've never seen that before ever happen in my life. Like someone screwing and the screw bounces into the mouth. Like that could have never. I don't know. You could probably practice it a million times and never do it right because he was standing like 3 feet away from the wall as he was screwing. But I thought it was hilarious because he was like, I don't really care about a weird, crazy coincidence things happening. I need to get this tin on this wall, so I'm just going to pull that same screw out and just kept screwing. I know it stuck with me for the rest of my life. It was just like, it's kind of a funny
Hey,
thing
screws are
that's happened.
expensive. It's a resource.
Yeah, he was just like, I'm not going to take a picture or like tell anyone about this. I'm just going to, he looked at me. I looked at him like, oh my gosh, that was amazing. And he was just like, nah. Whatever. Just kept going. So
that's funny. Any as you as a dad, anything that's happened where you're just like, the heck?
So, I don't really have a story about me as dad, but this morning, Reese and Wesley were, telling me Happy Father's Day or whatever best they could. And Reese was like, let me show you how much I love you. Jumps up and knees me square into the groin this morning. Like, he's just like, hey, Happy Father's Day. Right on my goods, so that was kind of funny. And then they got me cards this morning to tell me they love me too. But first thing he did this morning was straight to the goods. Yeah. So.
What about you, Josh?
Well, I would say me as a dad, I've left my kids at church. Not once, but twice. Miscommunicate with the wife. I'm home. I'm like, hey, where's Monroe at? I thought you had her. And like, nope. Next thing you know, go back to church. There she is. Why'd you leave me at church for? And then not too long ago, I did the same thing to Drake. I thought it was a Wednesday night. I think he went with Sarah. I'm like, I'm no more than probably a quarter of a mile away from my house. I'm right there where the Mason's Lodge is.
Yeah.
Drake calls me, hey, I'm ready to go. I thought he was already home. So I turned back around in the driveway, get him, come back. I think he went home and started. No. I'm like, okay.
Oops. Must be at church like Jesus was.
Yeah,
when
exactly.
He got left at church,
Hey, at least you're leaving him at the right place.
Exactly. So,
What about your dad? Any funny stories about growing up?
no, not really. My dad and I would practice a lot of together. Went to races together. Found my love of concerts together like that. So not so much funny. So,
Gotcha.
That's fun.
How about you?
Yeah, as a kid, so like my parents are divorced, so I had two dads essentially growing up, and then my grandparents have been very much. And there's like a collective theme in my family where like injuries don't exist. So like if you hurt yourself, you just kind of like exist in it. Like when I was a kid,
walk it off.
It's worse than that. It doesn't exist. You keep going. My mom was out of town somewhere, and my dad, we'd been playing catch, and he caught me like right here above my lip. And when I say it swelled, like my whole face swelled up. It was like purple. And didn't think anything of it. I went to bed. My mom came in at like 2 a.m. from her business trip and looked. She was like, his face is like green and purple. And so like every time I've had something in my life, like I don't even go to my dad or my stepdad or anybody for any like sympathy because they're just like, suck it up. Like, you're fine. I'm like 4 when this happens. And so as an adult, they're like, yeah, there's no like, they don't care at all if you hurt yourself.
Should be like, at least be the Sandlot. Give me some cold meat. You know,
no, they don't. Yeah, it's like I broke my arm one time, and I laid in bed until like 2 a.m. I was like, I think it's actually broken. I should probably go to the hospital. I broke it at like 2 p.m.
Yeah.
I just was like, it's fine. It'll shake off.
Right.
It's funny you say that because lately I've been, every time Reese is like, falling down or get hurt or whatever, I keep telling him to say it out loud. I'm tough.
Yeah.
And every time he does it, so he'll fall down, and like as soon as he falls down, he looks at me and says, "I'm tough." And I'm like, "Yeah, you are tough. You're right. We're tough together." So I think that's kind of funny. But
my dad was he was a cool dad, but he was very much like he was what he was. He was like a tough guy, and so it was just really funny growing up. Like all the like the normal like dad conversations you would have, we just didn't really have a lot of those, and so it was just like things would happen and I would learn. It's like, yep, told you shouldn't have done that. And like that was the end of it. There wasn't like any necessarily like I feel like I almost like baby or spoon feed my kids like my expectations of them. And for him it was like, don't do that. And if I did it, it was like he wasn't gonna say anything until the pain came.
Right.
And it was like the pain taught you that you shouldn't have done that thing. Which I don't know if it's right or wrong. I try not to do that with my kids where I try to kind of not protect them from the pain, but like hold it off a little bit, because there's different times in my life I remember talking to my dad. He's like, "Yeah, I knew you were doing that. You shouldn't have been doing that." Like, duh. Yeah. Like, what did you think I was gonna say?
It's funny.
Yeah, as a parent, I don't know. I've had an interesting run with my kids because we adopted Hassan and Neva when they were like 13 and 3, and then we have our own biological kid now, and so it's just I've had all different stretches of I've said so many stupid things that if they were G-rated I would say I'm here, but so many stupid things that I wish I could take back. Learning how to be a dad is a tough job, and I don't think any of us take it lightly, and we definitely shouldn't take it lightly.
I agree. Yeah.
It's an important job, and so I hope if anybody heard this episode and heard this conversation, of course, I want them to know Jesus and I want them to be connected. But I hope you feel encouragement that like, hey, life is as a dad it's tough intentionally, and it's not supposed to be easy, and the standard is high, and the work is thankless at times. And this isn't like a woe is dad moment, but like.
No, I'll go back to that same analogy as whereas like I know that's one of the reasons that God gives us kids is because he wants us to have that same viewpoint. Yeah. And we can learn a ton. I've already learned just the past 3.5 years that I've been a dad. I've already learned probably more than the rest of my life on how to be like a good parent or a good person in general about how to raise up another, because you're never going to get it always 100% right. Like you were saying, you're going to jack it up, but you learn from them, and it's kind of.
I actually just had a funny dad story just pop in my head. Shoot. So, my daughter had cancer, and so she was taking chemo and stuff, and she was in the hospital. And I was sitting there one night, and we were watching. So I don't watch kid stuff. Like my kids watch what I watch, or we listen to like Ari, my youngest one, would listen to like heavy EDM music and like hardcore music that was what would calm him down, because like in the car. I just listened to the stuff I like, and so I would just play it, and he would listen to it, and it calmed him down too. But so I was sitting in the hospital with my daughter, and we were watching the supermarket sweep, like the game show where you run through the supermarket, get the food, and cook it.
Yeah.
Because Suicide Squad was on TV, and it was too inappropriate for the cancer wing at the children's hospital. But we were watching the supermarket sweep, and I'm just like messing with her hair, and her hair starts falling out. And like she'd kept it for a while up to this point, and so I'm just kind of like raking her hair, and it's just kind of coming out. And the next thing I know, I'm like, all right, baby, tonight's the night. We're taking it all. So I just kept rubbing my hand over her head, and her hair kept falling out. It was about the time that, or it had been out for a minute. The Black Panther movie came out. You know how all the warrior women are like bald?
Yeah.
And so she was like, yes, my shield.
Nice. That's awesome.
It worked out perfectly where she could see a bald woman and think that she's like powerful and pretty. So it was kind of cool.
That is
it
cool.
worked out.
Yeah,
But
I mean,
it was
Lord-
just funny. I was just sitting there like rubbing hands, like tonight's the night, girl.
Yeah.
It's all going. Just get over it.
Yeah, and I think that's awesome. That's an awesome story. And I know God was probably in that moment with him as well.
Oh, yeah,
So
yeah.
that's cool. But yeah, with Reese, I've learned like you need to be on him at all times, but you also need to let him play. Because sometimes the other day when I was about to go to work, and I was working like the later shift. It starts at like 10, and I was like, "Hey, I'm about to go ahead to work." He's like, "Oh no, again?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I got to go to work. I got to put a roof over you." I was just playing, but I was like, "I put a roof over here. I got to get you some food." And he's like, "Hey, Daddy, you know what?" Because he has like some coins in his room. He's like, "I'll give you my money so you don't have to go to work." And I was just like, "Oh my gosh, dude, you freaking stabbed me right in the heart." Man.
When they get a little bit older, you'll be
gosh.
like, "You know how much I paid for all of this?" It won't be cute anymore.
No.
You'll just be yelling at him, telling
Or
him.
again, your broke little best friend.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. That was funny. Josh said that earlier, and I was like, "You're right. It's like having 3 friends. None of them can pay rent, and they all sleep on your couch."
Can't pay for your food, can't pay for their food,
Right.
their rent or nothing. But yeah, I know he said that the other day to me, and I was just like, man, it's so awesome to be a parent, because it is like, I tell people all the time, like I have friends who just are like, they're having their first babies, and I'm like, being a dad and being a parent is like a pendulum. There's 2 sides. It's constantly flipping back and forth between the literally the best moments of your life, because they are like so awesome, and then the most stressful. And and it's just clicking back and forth. They're like, "Oh, it's awesome. Oh man, I'm stressed. Oh, it's awesome. Oh man, I got to pay all these. How am I going to afford it?" Or
I would like to think that it goes away, but I look at the way I still put stress on my parents, and I'm like, yeah, it's never gonna end.
that is true, right? And yeah,
Still doing things to wind them up and drive them nuts.
yeah. Yeah, I have people I know people at work who have like their older kids, and they're like, dude, it's stressful when you have kids, but you can, control them and stuff. And then as soon as they get out of the house, that pendulum is even higher, because they're just stressing you out doing their own things. But it's got to get to it at some point. So it's awesome.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Well, cool. Any final thoughts on being a dad?
What you got, Josh?
Children are a gift.
He says unconvincingly.
A gift? Question mark. I don't know. I've really enjoyed, but I think you're saying, it's awesome to be a dad, but it's also a lot of responsibility. And it makes you think about the decisions before you make them. And so it makes me want to get in my word more, pray more, tell my kids more about Jesus, because they take the responsibility. I don't take it lightly, but
Yeah. And we were talking earlier, doing everything you can do.
Yeah.
Like, if you want your kids to pursue God, and you want your kids to have that relationship with Him, you yourself first need to establish that in your own life. That needs to be an important piece of your hierarchy. It needs to be something that you're focused on in your life. So start with yourself. If you can't pursue Him, then you can't really lead someone else to in the same way. So start there. Very cool. Hey, before you get out of here, make sure you like and subscribe to the podcast here on YouTube, or if you're on a podcast platform, leave us a comment, share it with a friend, do something cool with this. We just are some guys hanging out trying to help men get connected to Jesus and to their Bible. And so that's what we're here. That's what it's all about.
Yep.
And we're an extension of the Pointman ministry at that church. And so we have no ulterior motive other than to help men connect to their Bible and to the scriptures. But hey, we have a cool event coming up July 19th and 20th. Specifically July 20th, it is our Pointman Bago Tournament 2024. It's our 2nd annual.
Yeah.
Yes.
We got cash money on the line for the winner. We got a championship trophy that's pretty sick. All kinds of fun and prizes and fun throughout the day. So make sure you get signed up. Head to that.church/Pointman. Sign up there. I'll even throw a promo code out today for 15% off.
Oh, nice.
If you use TC Pointman Podcast.
Nice. Sick.
There we go.
That's
as
awesome.
the promo code TC Pointman Podcast, all one word.
Nice.
Throw that in there, and you'll get 15% off of your registration today. If you're part of our out-of-town friends and guests, don't stress about the 19th. Just show up on the 20th, and we'll get it rocking and rolling. But if you're local, we may ask you to come play a game or two on Friday night to get this thing kicked off and get started.
Yep.
Yes, sir.
So, well, cool. I think that's it for us today. We'll be back next week, hopefully, with another live episode of the TC Pointman Podcast.